Line's good.
Never on.
Whoa.
Hard. Hardly.
Come on, Brent.
Line's good.
Got real close.
I hear high, right?
Try and hit 2/3.
Have they saved it for her? Yes, they have.
Ooh, welcome to Game of Stones, everybody. I am Sean Graham, Scott alongside, as always. Hello, Scott.
Sean, good day.
How do you do?
I do. Okay.
Okay.
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. How are you?
Doing well.
Good.
It's all as well as well as could be expected here in the nation's capital as we continue to move through summer. Big sports month here in June, Scott. We've had the NBA go through its second round, now in the midst of the conference finals. The NHL, of course, moving towards declaring a Stanley Cup champion. Baseball is in full swing. French Open of tennis, the US Open in golf, and now, as we speak, Wimbledon is underway. I'm not a huge tennis guy, but that Wimbledon final day, or the 2 days, the Saturday, Sunday, that's almost appointment viewing for me.
Yeah, for me, Sean, it's the first Monday, or the second Monday rather of the tournament. That's really my favorite because they famously have been dark on the middle Sunday.
Yes, the day of rest.
It's the day of rest in the middle of the fortnight, and that means when we come back on Monday, it's wall to wall action. Always my favorite. It usually coincides with Canada Day, thereabouts, and I remember many times, having the day off, and just watching tennis all day. One year in particular, I remember building IKEA furniture while I watched the tennis, which was equal parts frustrating and fun. So pretty good.
Yeah. And I do remember the very famous match that went at, was it 53-51 in the last set? That was a Wimbledon match. And I do remember that it had to stop overnight because it got too dark. It was Isner and somebody else. And the next day we saw our good friend Dave Hyde, and it was before the match had resumed as yet. And I said, "Oh, did you see the tennis match?" And he's like, "Well, which tennis match?" And I was, "Well, today there's only one tennis match."
Yeah.
There's only one. So fun stuff happens at Wimbledon. There was a trivia question a few months ago when we played virtual trivia with our parents. And one of the questions was, what is the fruit on the top of the Wimbledon trophy? And we got it wrong. We thought it was a strawberry.
We did think it was a strawberry because of strawberries and cream, the famous breakfast, I guess, at Wimbledon.
That's right. But it is, of course, a pineapple, the exotic pineapple.
Of course. Who doesn't know that it's a pineapple?
I know. I thought that was just reserved for SpongeBob SquarePants house. But
yes, me too. I was not aware, but now I am, and now everyone else is too.
That's right. So because Wimbledon is underway, we thought it'd be fun to go through and look at the top 5 ranked women's players and men's players and see who their curling comparative was. So I've gone through, and courtesy of tennisprofiler.com, I've pulled the profiles of the top 5 men and women's players in the world. These rankings are maybe not fully up to date. The rankings, I took them, I don't even know if the French Open result was included in them when I pulled the ranking itself, but it should be pretty close to accurate as to who's what. So, and the in-between tournaments, the start of that grass court season won't be reflected in these rankings. So if somebody has dropped out of the top 5 and somebody else is in the top 5, I apologize for that. But these are 10 players who I think are pretty interesting. Some of whom, frankly, I had never heard of before. Others who I had heard a lot of before. So it's kind of fun to go through, pull their profiles again. Tennisprofiler.com is where I got all the info. So are you ready, Scott?
I think I'm as ready as I'm going to be.
Okay, so we're going to start on the women's side. Let's start with the number 1 player in the world, Ashley Barty, 25-year-old Australian. She has one major championship or one Grand Slam championship, the 2019 French Open. Her primary strength is her service game. She wins 71% of her first serve points. She has 20% more aces than her opponent. Her weakness, though, is that she's not as strong on the return game. She wins 3 times fewer points than her opponents on the return game. So overall, if you're looking at her style of play, I have tried to sum it up as that she's somebody who can wear you out from the baseline. Really good on the serve, but her forehand ranking is number 2. Her backhand ranking is number 32. So really strong player. It'll just wear you down to the point where you lose.
And really benefits from that service game.
Yeah.
That's really the strength.
Yeah. So as a result, it's tough to get points off of them. The serve, for as good as it is to win you games in tennis, obviously, it's also very good defensively, that people are going to have a tough time breaking you, and you are always in the position of power if you're never being broken.
Yeah. So if we equate that over to curling,
Yeah.
we think of that as, okay, somebody who's really good with the hammer.
Yes.
They're really hard to steal against. They might not convert every hammer, but they've got generally a high hammer percentage and tough to steal against.
Yeah. So as I was thinking about this, my initial thought was that is a great description for Rachel Homan, a team who is going to wear you out. You are going to have to play a perfect game if you want to beat them. And they don't give up a lot when they have the hammer. They aren't super aggressive without the hammer either, typically. So they're not teams that are going to steal a lot. And Ashley Barty's not great on the return game in that respect. She'll try to play it out and see if you will make a mistake. Not going to be super aggressive. Holman's a little like that. And ultimately, not going to blow you out, but you're not going to beat her very often either.
Yeah. I think this is a really good comparison, Sean, because like you say, Team Homan, we've talked in the past about them. They kind of let people hang around. And a lot of them doing that is that they don't steal very much. They're not like high up there in the amount of steals that they generate, but they're very solid with the hammer. When they get in trouble is when they stop converting and then start giving up multiples. So, I think this is a really apt comparison.
So, Scott, let's move on to number 2. Who's in that number 2 spot on the women's rankings?
Well, Sean, this is a name that's been in the news quite a bit, and that's going to be Naomi Osaka from Japan. 4 Grand Slams to her credit. I believe the Australian Open, this past one in January and 2019, and then 2018, 2020 Wimbledon.
Pretty good because she's only 23 years old. I already have 4 Grand Slams. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
No, definitely not anything wrong with that. Going from the strength, I have here 70% more winners and 2.5 times fewer double faults than her opponent. So, if you're hitting more winners, obviously you're going to get more points. And cutting down on those double faults is really good, especially if you can get the first serve up and then you're, putting a lot more pressure on your opponent with the serve. On the other side, the weakness is 50% more errors than the opponents. I believe these are unforced errors.
Yes, they are.
Yes. So 50% more unforced errors than her opponent. That's where, you're going to be hitting really hard, but you're also going to give up a lot of points.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in the comparison here, we've got, Sean, you've written as a style, a real puncher as a style. You got that dominant serve. You're really punching, but you are going to make some errors sometimes, right? And those errors are the things that can come back and bite you. When you're not making the errors, you're unbeatable.
Yes.
So for that comparison, we have Team Carrie Anderson. Sean, how does that sound?
I really like this. Carrie Anderson, when she first came onto the national scene, she was a pretty much hit only type player. She had the high hard one in her back pocket. That draw weight wasn't quite there on her first go around at a Scotties. And then she's improved it, but it's still not necessarily the automatic that you might associate with some other players when they're going really well. I guess the great example of that would be the 2020 Scotties final. She has that draw to win in 10 that she misses, gives up the steal. She makes it in 11, but she missed the one in 10. And that's the sort of thing where her game, to be fully dominant, has to have that element to it. So if you're going into a game against Carrie Anderson, I think if it's going to be a situation where they have the hammer, you want to force her to draw, because she has been demonstrated that she'll make pretty much every hit, and she'll make most of the draws too. But that is the slight crack, and that's the same thing that we see a little bit with Osaka here, that it's really hard to get anything off of her serve. But at the same time, you might be able to get easier games yourself where you're holding your serve, which might give you a better opportunity to break at some point, right? So there's just that separation of dominance on one side and really good but not quite as dominant, and that's where the little crack of light comes in for the opponent.
Yeah, and I'll notice here too, Osaka's volley ranking, so when she comes to the net, is only 94.
Yeah.
So again, maybe not as good with that soft touch in a similar way to Carrie Anderson.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, the sort of draw weight net play is very similar in that regard. They have the soft hands. All right, so let's move on to the number 3 ranked women's player. This is Simona Halep, the Romanian, 2-time Grand Slam winner, 2018 French, 2019 Wimbledon. So she's actually the defending champion right now at the Championships Wimbledon, as there was not a 2020 event. Her strength is the first serve return points one. So she wins 39% of her opponent's first serve points. That is a very high percentage. 61% on the second serve. So she is almost at 50% of total points won on the return game. That gives you a lot of chances to break the opponent, to take leads in sets. That is a very phenomenal skill to have. Her weakness is at the net. She doesn't really go to the net very often, so she's not a great net player, which would help to account for the fact that her service ranking is all the way down at 52. So she's a player who, if you get into rallies with her, you're not going to beat her in a lot of rallies, regardless of who serves. But if you go quick off of her serve, you might be able to get some points off of her, which you're going to need because she's gotten points off of your serve. So I would assess her overall as a very balanced player, really good on both sides of the ball. Somebody who, there's a strength in one area, but you're going to have to play a fully well-rounded match against her to win. And my comp for a balanced team is I put down Anna Hasselborg.
Yeah, Sean, Anna Hasselborg, very good comp here, very balanced. They're the kind of team that can beat you anyway. I think we talk about them a lot being maybe the best women's team in the world, and that they really have everything. Like, they can play the hits, they can play the draws. You got to make a run back. Sure, Nockenhauer is gonna make that run back. You need the tick shot. We got that with Malberg. So pretty much everything there for Team Hasselborg. We did talk a lot this past season, Sean, about Silvana Tirinzoni and her team being able to beat you anyway. Especially we saw that at the Women's Worlds, where they were so dominant that they sort of, okay, you want to play aggressive, boom, we can do that. You want to play defensive, yeah, no problem.
Yep.
So my thought immediately went to Tirinzoni, but I do like Anna Hasselborg in this spot.
Yeah, I don't think you can go wrong with either of them. And we did see, I think, a little bit this year that Tirinzoni played a little more balanced than they have in the past. And we'll see what I'm talking about a little when it comes up. But I have a sense of Tirinzoni as really aggressive and going all the way, all the time, like really just almost playing like her back's against the wall every end. That's my perception. But this year in the games that we saw, of course, we didn't see as many as we would have liked, but I got the sense that they were a little more balanced. So I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think, though, Tirinzoni might be a better comp for another player.
Okay. I guess we'll see as we go along.
We will. So, Scott, the next player on the list is an individual who I have to admit I was not familiar with. Are you familiar with the Belarusian number 4 ranked player in the world, Arina Sabalenka?
Well, Sean, I am familiar in the sense that I know how to pronounce her name, Arina Sabalenka. She's number 4 on our list here. No Grand Slams.
Very young player. Yeah.
Very young. Well, 23. I'd say young, not super young, not 18 or anything.
No, she's not. She's good observation. Well, 23 is not 18.
Well, like 30 is old for tennis, right? So in the first half of her career.
Yes.
Hopefully.
Yes.
Sean, her strength is really on her service game. 71% of first serve points won. 71, that's pretty high.
Yeah.
And then second serve points won 51%, which is really, really good.
Yeah.
The weakness, on the other hand, 70% more unforced errors on the backhand than the opponents. So not as strong with her backhand there. Forehand's a lot stronger.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing that you're going to scout as an opponent. Like, okay, she's weak on the backhand. We want to force her to her backhand. And then for her part, she's going to try to stay on the forehand, of course, as much as she can through the course of a match. So because of her great skills on the serve and because she does have so many errors, I equate that with being very aggressive, where you're playing aggressively, you're trying to hit that line, you're trying to get really close to the net, top spin, all that kind of stuff. So I have her as a very aggressive player, which is why my comp for her was Tirinzoni. As I talked about, I associate them as being a very aggressive team, but you have a different thought.
Yeah, Sean, what immediately came to mind for me was Jennifer Jones. Now, I wouldn't be able to make the direct comparison because, as we mentioned, such a young player with no majors.
Yeah,
compared to Jennifer Jones with all the majors. But in terms of play style and talking about a very aggressive play style, really wanting to take it to the opponents, I think of Jennifer Jones when I think of that sort of the first thought, aggressive curling in the women's game. That's Jennifer Jones.
Yeah, so I initially had actually written down Suzanne Birt too, as another individual who plays super aggressively and will give you opportunities. Will make, usually in Suzanne Birt's cases, it's physical errors as opposed to mental errors, and that's I think what you see too with Sabalenka. And I just didn't think that Suzanne Birt is quite at that same level to be up compared with somebody who's ranked 4th in the world in their sport. So yeah, I think I think Jennifer Jones is a pretty good comp there, that she is very aggressive. And we've seen it over the past few years where she'll give up the big end too. And she was always risking doing that earlier in her career, but she didn't do it as often because she was able to make that last bailout shot more frequently than she has over the last couple of years. So I'm okay with Jones as the comp. I guess the argument that I might have with it is just how far she's fallen in the curling rankings. And when I say how far she's fallen in Jennifer Jones' world, she's fallen far. In real human world, she hasn't fallen very far at all. But for where she was, there's been a noticeable drop off. Whereas for Sabalenka, earlier in her career, she should just continue to ascend. So they're kind of on different career trajectories at this point.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair quibble.
Thank you. I appreciate you validating my quibbleness on that. Now, you could also make the argument that Tirinzoni is the best team in the world, and having them compared to the 4th ranked player of tennis maybe isn't apt either. So either one of those, though, I'm not going to argue too much But because I do think both very aggressive and both can provide opportunities to their opponents. All right, so let's go on to the final women's player that we are going to talk about, the 5th ranked player in the world, Sophia Kenin, the American player, 22 years old, won Grand Slam, the 2020 Australian Open. And oh, if we only had known at the time what was coming after that event. She has a phenomenal backhand, wins 76% of her points on the backhand drop shot. So very fine touch on her on that backhand drop shot. Her weakness is the service game. 40% fewer aces than her opponent. She's also bad at the net, and that is typically associated. You go into the net when you are serving. So her volley ranking is down at 92, serve ranking at 65. Her strength is the backhand, and otherwise she's kind of middling in the rankings. And for her to win, she does have to be very patient. She will rely on her opponents making some errors, therefore staying at the baseline, get into rallies, see if somebody will make a mistake. Very patient team. So I put down Fujisawa as the comp here, as a team who isn't going to overpower you. They are going to challenge you. They're going to be very good. They're not going to make a lot of errors, and they can sit back and pounce when you make a mistake. So Satsuki Fujisawa is my comp on that.
Yeah, take advantage of the opportunities that are presented to her.
Yes. And that's what Fujisawa does, right? They're not, I mean, they can throw it hard, they can make all the shots, but they're not really a team that is going to overpower you. And if you play your best game as you're at the top level, you're going to win a lot against Satsuki Fujisawa. Whereas if you play your best against Homan, Anderson, Tirinzoni, Hasselberg, that top four, it might not be enough.
Yeah, no, that's right, Sean. I think you're right with that. For me, the first person that came to mind when I thought of a patient play style was Rachel Homan. But looking a little deeper into the numbers, I think Fujisawa is the right one for this comp.
All right. So we have Satsuki Fujisawa. They're a very international comp on the women's side and a very international ranking on the women's side for the tennis. We have 5 women from 5 different countries, and we have what we got? 3 countries represented here on the comps. So very international feeling to the women's side of this comparison.
Yeah, we got 4. We got Canada, Switzerland, Sweden, and Japan.
There you go. I love it.
Very good.
All right, so let's move on to the men, Scott. The ATP top 5 rankings. There is one note, or I should note too, just before we do that, on the WTA, when I pulled this, Serena Williams was 6th in the ranking. That's why she's not included. I would put, just without looking at the stats or anything, Serena Williams, Jennifer Jones, just there you go.
Yeah, okay. That's a good place to put Jones in here.
Okay, so let's move to the men. The number 1 player in the world probably won't surprise you. It is Novak Djokovic, the Serbian who just won. Or no, he didn't win. Did he win?
Yeah.
Oh, who just won the French Open.
He did, yes. Won the French Open. And a big comeback.
Right, he was down 2-0 in that match, right?
I believe so, yes. I believe so.
All right, and that was his 19th Grand Slam victory on the march to 20 at some point. He will get there. He has a high return percentage. He wins 33% of the opponent's first serve points, which is very high on the men's side. The numbers are a little different when you look men's versus women's on return game, service game, and what the stats are. Really solid on both the backhand and on the forehand. Really just a solid all-around player. If there is a weakness to him, it's that he doesn't overpower the opponent on the service game. So same percentage of aces for him as his opponents. But if you look at his overall rankings, incredibly solid all around. Number 2 on return, number 5 forehand, number 4 backhand. Just an all around solid player. Could be on his way to the best of all time, or at the very least, the most decorated of all time. So I have the comp here as Kevin Cooey. Scott, am I on the right track?
Sean, I really like this comp. Djokovic is, like you say, he might end up with the most majors of anyone. Federer, of course, has that right now, and he's one behind Rafa, who we'll get to later. But he's also 34, so he's not sort of in his prime anymore. His service game has, become not as good as it used to be. It used to be where he won basically because of his serve, and now he's become a bit more crafty. I really like this comp to Kevin Cooey, another curler who's probably in the last maybe 4 years of his career, if we see him past this quadrennial,
right?
Who used to just be throwing the high hard one, but has managed to bring sort of everything into his game. And if there's one player in the world that you want throwing that last shot at a world championship, Kevin Cooey's on the short list of all those skips. So I really think this is a very apt comparison.
Yeah, and I like too that they are on kind of the same point, or at the same point in their careers too, where they're still dominant when they go play, but it's obvious and clear that they're, on the 15th, 16th hole of their career, the round of their career. So it's not like we're going to see them forever, of course. And it's sort of this race now to them. Can they win those last few events that really will put them over the top in terms of being the most decorated? And then we can have the debate of best, which is always fun to have. And there's a subjectivity to that. But certainly he seems on his way. Djokovic does seem on his way to getting the most Grand Slams, as Cooey certainly seems to be on his way to a Brier record at some point. All right. So we're in agreement on Djokovic. Are we going to be agreement on the next one? Let's see.
The next one, Sean, Daniel Medvedev from Russia at number 2. No Grand Slams to his name yet. I say yet. I do believe he will get there. 25 years old. His strength, Sean, he's really a very good server. Wins points 71% of his first serves and 52% of his second. We saw this pretty similar to Aryna Sabalenka. His weakness, though, it doesn't win much when he goes to the net, which holds his serve game back a little bit. So it, like, as great as it is, it could be even better with a little better work at the net. So this guy, patient, Sean.
Yeah, seems very patient curler. Yeah.
And really, really can control the game with his serve. When he's in it, he really feels like he's controlling the game, and it's going to take the opponent doing something really good, like really special, to beat them.
Right.
So the comp we have for this, Sean, is Brad Jacobs. Why don't you talk me through that?
So in thinking about this idea of controlling the game, it's not just Brad Jacobs himself. It's the whole team. And the addition of Kennedy really helps with that. Mark Kennedy can be a very patient player in the same way that Kevin Cooey can. So he sort of gets it, honestly, I think, from playing with Cooey, and even Martin could be patient at times if he wanted to during his career. He didn't want to that often, which I don't necessarily blame him for. So in his career, Kennedy has played with patient players. Jacobs was not very patient early in his career. He would be somewhat impetuous, if I may. It seemed he would play really aggressively. He wouldn't think things through. The lasting image I have of Brad Jacobs for the last quad is him saying, "All right, let's just talk this through." He really wants to settle, make sure he knows what's going on throughout the course of the end. So he has that personal patience and can control the game in that regard. But the whole team has really bought into this, and they can control the game because all of them, even Ryan Harnden, not that he has to do it very often, but they can all hit. They can all play that defensive game. EJ can clear things out when he needs to. And even if it gets to Kennedy's second shot and they have to bail, they can still bail. And they're not scared of the blank end. They'll keep the hammer. they would play a 1-0 game if they got the hammer in the first, and they would not object to that. So you have that patience, you have that big weight ability in the same way that Medvedev has that big service ability that allows you to control the game. And then you can be patient on the other side, just wait for your opportunity and go for it.
Yeah. I think you're right. They have gotten a lot better at that, waiting for that opportunity, like you say. Kennedy is likely a good or a big reason for that, rather.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's pretty good. Another person I think of when I think of patient, Sean, is Jason Gunlickson, but
Yeah.
I don't think he's quite at the level that we're willing to talk comparison with one of the top 5 in the world.
No, I don't think so. And Gunlickson can get in a little more trouble, I think, than Medvedev has.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
So I kind of like Jacobs there, and I'm really curious to see how this fall goes for Jacobs. I think, for as much as we've talked on the show, like Dunstone, certainly, I have some high hopes for them or high expectations for them coming off of the bubble. I think Jacobs is the most interesting team going into the trials.
Yeah, there's definitely a case to be made for that.
All right, so let's move on to the number 3 ranked player in the world who just announced, or recently announced, that he will not participate in the Olympic Games and is not participating in Wimbledon yet. He is still ranked very high because he's won 20 Grand Slams. That is Rafael Nadal. Scott, Rafael Nadal has been around so long that when I was a summer student working in downtown Toronto, and I was going through Union Station every day to get from the office I was working in to the Rogers Center, where I worked at the Blue Jay games, there were giant posters of Rafael Nadal as he was coming to Toronto for the Toronto event.
Wow.
And that was 15 years ago. And he was a top player then.
Yeah. And he was 20 years old then, Sean.
Yeah.
Outstanding career. He's obviously in the conversation with Federer, with Djokovic, as to who's the best player of this generation, I'll say.
Sure.
But Sean, he's slowed down a bit, right?
He has.
As do we all,
Yeah.
slow down a bit with age. He has 20% fewer aces than his opponents. So his service game, as you age a bit, as we saw with Djokovic, right? The service game wasn't quite as high.
Right.
But he also allows 10% fewer aces than the average player on the tour. So he's really good at making a return. He's great on his forehand. He's ranked number 1 in the world and number 3 on his backhand. So what he's able to do, because he's not able to get the aces, he's able to return a lot. He's able to play defense better than almost anybody on tour.
Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, we've compared him to Brad Gushue, a team that we've seen be very patient.
Yeah.
We talked about patience before. Gushue is very patient, willing to hit, maybe a little less willing to have to play runbacks. Although with Mark Nichols, they can make them.
Right.
They really try to control the game from both sides, whether they have hammer or not.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that you see too with Gushue in the 2020 Briar, the game against Jacobs, where they gave up 4 in the first end, it was shocking because Brad Gushue doesn't do that. Right? Like they don't do that. They were able to come back and eventually win that game, but they just don't give up that big number. Even when you can get a 2 on Brad Gushue, you kind of look up and you're like, really? They gave up a 2?
Yeah.
Really? So it's just so good. They're not quite, and I'd like to look at the numbers, but I don't associate them with necessarily being as good with the hammer as Cooey or Botcher, but they're so good without the hammer that it balances that out, that you have to scratch and claw for every point against this team. And that's what you have to do against Rafael Nadal. Whether he has the serve or you're serving, he's going to make you scratch and claw. And that's why he's so good and has been so good for so long. I think the same is true for Brad Gushue, that the change in his career, the success that they've had recently, partly it's because Mark Nichols came back, and you also had the improvement of Gallant and Walker as they got older. All of those things coalesced, but you also had a change in Brad Gushu as well, not only in the shooting ability, but also in his mental game and the ability to stay calm, be defensive, wait for your opportunities, don't go too early. We saw that when he was a young player, probably over aggressive, aggressive to a fault, given the other team opportunities to get big ends. He doesn't do that anymore. And with the shooting ability of that team overall, it's hard to score against them.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Let's move on to the number 4 ranked player on the ATP Tour. We'll go back to an Australian. This is Dominic Thiem.
Oh, Sean, he's Austrian.
Oh, excuse me. We'll go to the Austrian Dominic Thiem. He is the 4th ranked player on the ATP Tour. 27-year-old, only one Grand Slam championship. That is the 2020 US Open. And he is known for his great baseline play. 51% of rallies he wins after a backhand, 61% after the forehand. So he can sit back there and just hit them hard and win a majority of those points. Problem with him, or his weakness, is a lower ratio of first serve winners and aces than your average player. So you have to, or he has to, get into those rallies to really capitalize on his strengths. He is the 7th ranked forehand player, 12th on the backhand, but down at 59 service, 72 on the return game. So not somebody who is going to beat you out of the gate on any point. He wants to get you into a point, get deep into the point to really capitalize on his strength. So a slow starter, but a very patient player. And I have that as really summarizing Brendan Bottcher.
Yeah, Sean, another great comparison in my mind. Brendan Bottcher, we talked about them not running away from people, similar to a Rachel Homan this year. Sort of starting off, not minding a few blanks. They don't mind putting the broom down for that hit after the first one comes in. A very, very patient team. They're not going to run away from you, but more often than not, they're going to beat you, which I think matches Dominic Thiem very well.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you're going to get deep in a lot of tournaments. You're going to beat a lot of players. If you can stretch out those points, hopefully for you, if your team or Bottcher, the other team gets impatient and makes a mistake just because they're frustrated or they're not getting everything they want. That's what you want to do in those cases. And you're also going to get to the point where you're playing shots that are your strength. And certainly we see that from Bottcher a lot. They can work into or work the game to get to where they're throwing the shots that they want to throw. They're dictating the pace, and that's what Dominic Thiem wants to do. Dictate the pace, lengthen the point.
Absolutely.
All right, Scott, let's bring us home now. Who we got? Who is the final player that we're going to talk about here?
The final player, we're going to talk about the Greek, Stefanos Tsitsipas.
Yeah, well done.
I'm playing and playing him saying his own name at the same time. So Sean is a really young player, 22 years old, no majors, no Grand Slams yet, but he's very talented.
Yeah, came close, right? He was the runner up at that French Open.
I believe so. Yeah. And so 20% more aces than average and 20% fewer double faults than average, which is really, really good. A very strong server.
Yeah.
Where his weakness is he has a low ratio of his return wins and a very high error percentage. This is like what you'd expect to see from a young player, right? Making a lot of errors, not winning as much on the return, but really able to shine in areas where they're able to dictate in, the service game. So for that, we have this team as compared to a young and improving team. That's got to be Matt Dunstone, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're looking around right now, that Brendan Bottcher has graduated from the young and improving category and has become established. And Matt Dunstone is really leading the way. And Mowat, too, has graduated from Young and Improving.
Agreed.
And so Dunstone is the team that's left, or the top team that's left in that category right now, of that Young and Improving. When is it going to be that they get over that hump? Is it going to be the Trials? Is it going to be the Brier next year? I would even say Canada Cup at some point, or go on a run of multiple slams in a season. Once they can get to that point, and it is coming based on everything that we've seen, it'd be shocking if they didn't get there. And it seems like it's the same for Stefanos too, that it's just a matter of time for him to get that first Grand Slam. So a really direct comp there. It's a case of just continuing to improve, get a little better with the hammer for Dunstone, Stefanos with the service game. And on the other side, it's learning how to be more effective defensively. It's not giving the other team those big opportunities, the other player that opportunity, not giving them, for Stefanos, easy service games, make them work all the time on their serve. Same thing with Dunstone. Don't give up the 3, the 4. Don't really hand games to your opponent. We saw at least once at the Brier where somewhat easy shot late in the game that just little misses, like quarter of an inch off, but it gives the other team opportunities. Now, he got to the semifinal, no complaints, but he did have a few misses in there that are the sort of thing that is going to prevent you from winning these events, because that's all it takes, is just a quarter of an inch at the wrong time. So Young and Improving, definitely going to get there, certainly high expectations. So I like this comp a lot.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense. And like you say, limiting those errors, that's going to be the key going forward, because all the skill is there.
Yeah, no question about it. It's just harnessing it, and when is it going to happen? And for Dunstone, they're young, they'll get there, I think. And same with Stefanos as well. At 22, already into a Grand Slam final. He's got a long run ahead of him.
Absolutely.
So there you have it. The top 5 men's and women's tennis players and our curling comps for them. That was fun, Scott.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun, Sean. We did golfers, I believe, last time, right?
Yeah, a couple of years ago, back in 2019. I'll link that in the show notes. Our golf episode where we took the top 10 men's players, I believe, on tour and did comps for them based on their style of play, which was fun. So that was sort of the inspiration behind this one, to see how the sports all relate to each other, because there are trends that emerge among players and how they play, style of play, strengths, weaknesses, that we can relate back to the teams that we have come to know on our curling screens.
That we know so well on our curling screens.
On our curling screens, on our curling ice, on our TV screens. I don't know.
I like it.
All right. So do let us know if you agree with these comps. Also, if you are a big tennis fan and think that we got stuff wrong on our assessment of some of these players, you can let us know. You can also go yell at tennisprofiler.com, because I certainly don't know enough about the players themselves and their styles of play, nor am I sophisticated enough to watch a tennis match to know the ins and outs of what's going on. And I know the rules, but I don't know the real subtleties of tennis to know what's going on.
Yeah, I can listen to John McEnroe tell me what's up, but that's probably it.
I did see a thing though, Scott. There is real science behind, how the players, they get like 3 balls from the ball kid and they look at them and then they like toss at least one of them away.
Yeah.
There's actually a science behind that you want the least fluffy ball, the one that still has like the tightest fluff on it, as your first serve ball. Yeah. And so the balls are played for, I believe, 6 or 7 games, something like that, before they switch out the balls. And the researchers who do this have found, like, they can tell which ball or which balls are selected for the first serve versus which balls are selected for the second serve with just by looking at them.
Really?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Wow. I've always been like, oh geez, okay. But yeah, it makes sense. You'd want a slicker one to get a little more skid on that first serve.
Yeah.
Keep it low.
Yeah. A little more speed too. It's fractional, but apparently it gives them a lot of confidence.
Yeah, very good.
So I know that at the very least.
It's
And
like matching stones, right?
that's right. Exactly. The probably just as relevant too. So yeah, let us know though if you're big into tennis, if we got something off, and we'll try to correct that next week, or if you have better thoughts on the comps, if we maybe missed somebody who would be a better comp for one of these players, do reach out. Let us know. You can find us historyslam@gmail.com, on social media at Game of Stones Pod. Scott is at Scott Lakes TV, and I am at the Sean Graham. So certainly let us know. And if you have not yet, please do subscribe to the show wherever it is you get your podcast. Do the likes, the ratings, comments, all that good stuff. Helps the show continue to grow. And head on over to GameOfStonesPod.com. All of our past episodes are there. Plus, the merch is available. T-shirts, all proceeds, and we're matching going to Food Banks Canada, and then the rest of the merch, all proceeds plus our matching, is going to the Sandra Schmirler Foundation. So do check that out. So Scott,
Please do.
Yeah. So Scott, what do you got on tap for the rest of the day?
Well, Sean, it's a warm summer day. Maybe I'll crack a beer, go to the park. Maybe I'll take a walk. Nice walk outside. Nice day for walking.
Yeah.
And that's basically it. Pretty boring.
All right. Well, enjoy it.
Thanks.
And enjoy everybody out there too. If you are in Canada, in addition to reflecting on the country and however you choose to celebrate, it could be an opportunity, if you have not yet, to read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report and look at some of the calls to action, see what you can incorporate into your personal life or into your community. It's a good opportunity to reflect upon that. And for all of our friends in the United States, before we talk again, it will be the 4th of July. So happy 4th of July. Celebrate in whatever way you do. Just do so safely, especially if you're around fireworks and alcohol. I hate reading those stories every year, Scott.
Yeah, not a good combination.
No, so do be safe out there. But this period of early July, hopefully everyone has a safe and a happy. We'll be back with everybody next Tuesday to talk a little more curling. But until then, keep those brooms on the ice and don't dump that intern.
Make the final.